Is there any smell your friends and family would rather come home to than warm cookies just out of the oven? The nut allergic may always have to fear hidden nuts in cookies, and the gluten allergic may prefer Rice Krispie treats. Even I'd take a great pumpkin pie over cookies any day. But what's really fun about cookies is how you can just kind of add whatever you have around the house. Oatmeal, raisins, peanut butter, chocolate chips, anything works. Baking cookies requires 5 basic ingredients: sugar, butter, egg, yeast, and flour. Grains are the foundation of many of the ingredients in this recipe. Grains can be milled into flour or fed to cattle and chickens. Chickens simply lay us eggs, but we need to milk cows and churn their milk to make our butter. We used to make all of our sugar from sugarcane. Now genetically modified sugar beets provide much of the sugar for the United States. Yeast are fungi used in baking and brewing. Instead of yeast, I've substituted baking powder, which fortunately doesn't need to be left to sit overnight and rise. Now, there's some concern that certain kinds of baking powder have aluminum in it, which has been linked to Alzheimer's, among other diseases, but I'm almost certain that this baking powder that I have doesn't have any aluminum. It doesn't say specifically on the box, but really aluminum has been done away with for the most part in baking powder, so I feel at least 50% sure that there's no aluminum in this baking powder. For today's recipe, I've chosen white flour and white sugar. Not because they're necessarily the healthiest or the best tasting, but because they're the cheapest and they conform most closely to people's expectations of what cookies should taste like. Whisking is really the most difficult part of the whole baking process. In fact, it can get really boring and repetitive. So I prefer to do it when I have someone else in the room to talk to, or at the very least, to pretend that I have an audience listening to me. Now that our dough is ready, it's time to start molding the individual cookies. As a baker, you'll need to decide on the size you want each cookie to be. Do you want supersized American cookies, which your friends and family can't even finish in one sitting? Or do you want tiny, bite-sized cookies, which tease the tongue without satisfying the stomach? Medium-sized cookies seem rather innocuous, but large and small cookies will attract more attention. Did you make them really small because you wanted people to eat 15 of them? Or did you make them really huge because you wanted people to stuff themselves on a cookie they would normally never even try to finish? Now we need to decide the temperature at which we would like to bake our cookies and how long we would like to bake them for. Higher temperatures, around 400 and 450 degrees, and longer baking times, upwards of 20 minutes, result in crispier, more fully cooked cookies. Lower temperatures, generally between 350, 300 degrees, and shorter baking times, generally minimum of 10 minutes or so, result in much softer cookies. Now, I personally prefer these really soft cookies that still almost taste like cookie dough. Once the cookies are out of the oven, the last step in the baking process before you can enjoy your delicious cookies is allowing them to cool. Now, it's important that you get the cookies quickly off of the baking sheet so that as they cool, they don't harden and get stuck to the sheet in which you baked them. Instead, you should move them onto a cooling rack, on which they will be in contact with a smaller amount of surface area and will be more easily lifted off the cooling rack once they're ready to be eaten. Oh, that whisking was worth it.